This is a smelly video. A simple omelette caused nearly every passenger on the flight sick at 30,000 feet, leaving the whole cabin reeking of vomit and diarrhea. Because there were so many people waiting for the bathroom, some passengers just couldn't hold it in and relieving themselves in their seats. And also because of this incident, most airlines changed their rules. On February 3, 1975, a Japan Airlines Boeing 747 took off from Tokyo International Airport. According to the plan, the flight was supposed to make a short stop in Anchorage to refuel, then cross the Arctic, stop in Copenhagen, and finally land at Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. The whole trip took about 20 hours. The plane was carrying 344 passengers and 20 crew members. Most of the passengers were Japanese Coca-Cola salesmen and their families, who had won a trip to Paris in a company contest. In Anchorage, food prepared by a Japan Airlines subsidiary was loaded onto the plane for a meal served near the end of the flight. After takeoff, everything seemed to go smoothly. 90 minutes before reaching Copenhagen, the flight attendants began handing out meals that included omelettes, ham, steak, and sandwiches. Everyone was happily enjoying their food. But about an hour after eating, passengers in first class started feeling nauseous, cramping, vomiting, and having diarrhea. The airplane's bathrooms quickly filled with long lines, and the sound of vomiting echoed throughout the cabin. As time went on, more and more people started feeling sick. With too few bathrooms and long waits, some passengers just couldn't hold it any longer and ended up relieving themselves in their seats. Can you imagine the entire flight reeking of vomit and diarrhea? The captain quickly reached out to Copenhagen Airport for help. Luckily, the plane finally landed in Copenhagen. The airport had prepared an exclusive lounge, and a team of medical staff arrived to check on the patients. But due to the language barrier, the initial checkup was messy. Less than 10 minutes later, the lounge started to smell just like the plane, filled with the same awful stench and the sound of passengers in agony. This freaked out the local staff, and they quickly found a restaurant worker who spoke Japanese to act as a translator. They eventually confirmed that 196 passengers and one flight attendant had food poisoning. 9 had bloody diarrhea, while 144 were vomiting and having diarrhea. They were all taken to a local hospital, with 30 passengers sent to the ICU. To calm the rest passengers down, Japan Airlines handed out meal vouchers at the airport, but most of them refused. They'd rather be hungry than risk another bout of food poisoning. The rest passengers took a bus tour of Copenhagen, then boarded a flight to Paris. Afterwards, staff in Anchorage began an investigation. Lab tests on stool and vomit samples from passengers, along with 33 leftover ham omelette samples. Then people found Staph aureus. They also detected high levels of toxins produced by the bacteria in the ham omelette. The luckiest part of the story was the pilots' biological clocks were still on Alaska time, so they chose to eat steaks instead of omelettes. Normally, airline meals get checked really carefully before they go out. So how did so much bacteria end up on board? Could it have been on purpose? The investigation traced the bacteria back to where it all started: International In-Flight Catering, a Japan Airlines subsidiary in Anchorage where the meals were made. They eventually found out that 3 cooks made the food, and one of them had infected cuts on the index and middle fingers of his right hand. Tests showed those cuts had staph, and further tests confirmed he was the source of the contamination. This cook had bandaged them up, but didn't tell his boss because he thought it wasn't a big deal. Plus, management never checked his health, even though they were supposed to. The aircraft served a total of 354 meals, and this cook handled 220 of the omelettes. After preparing the food, they stored 6 of the omelettes at room temperature for 6 hours, then kept them in a 10 degrees Celsius refrigerator for another 14.5 hours. Finally, the meals were placed in the non-air-conditioned aircraft galley for 8 hours. The bacteria grew like crazy in those conditions, which led to the whole food poisoning outbreak. But if the meals had been kept cold the whole time, none of this would have happened. Fortunately, all the passengers recovered. One person even lost his ability to speak and understand for a bit, but it was temporary. The only person who died was Japan Airlines catering manager, 52-year-old Kenji Kuwabara. When he found out the cook responsible was one of his employees, he just couldn't handle the pressure and ended up taking his own life at home. This whole thing was a wake-up call for airlines. Just imagine, if the pilots had eaten the ham omelettes too, the outcome could have been much more catastrophic. As a result, many airlines have changed their catering policies to avoid a repeat. Now, crew members get different meals made by different cooks so that food poisoning can't knock out the entire crew. Sometimes strict rules are put in place because of some really painful lessons learned the hard way. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll be posting more cool videos.